We have a slightly different format today, which is that I'm going to speak very briefly, then Larry Speltz is going to talk about Gian Carlo Menotti, and then I will introduce John Pascoe, our main speaker, and then John Pascoe will speak, and there'll be time at the end for questions, and wrapping up as usual at 1:30. Is there anyone here who hasn't been to a wide-angle talk before? Their hands are full of food. Very special welcome to all of you. And just to let you know that the purpose of Wide Angle is to continue the tradition of the founders of the Library Society to make this place a sort of one-stop information and ideas exchange, and it's been functioning like that since 1748. And it's also a place to spend a quiet hour thinking about something different from your usual activities while eating a delicious organic lunch from Black Bean Co. A couple of quick thank yous. Our sponsor today is Charleston Hotels, which runs a variety of inns and exclusive boutique hotels around town, including the Middleton Place Inn. And we're also very grateful to Gil Evans for co-sponsoring this delicious lunch. Thank you all very much. SCENE, Spoleto SCENE is the Young Patrons Committee and Club of Spoleto. And they have helped us put the word out about today, so thank you very much, particularly Mary and Glenn, and thank you Paula Edwards, the publicity head of Spoleto USA, for supporting all of this and helping arrange to have John here with us today. And one more quick thing, the Library Society staff do an invisible job behind the scenes, and I would love to mention them every single week, but particularly today I want to say that all this would not be possible without the many hours of work that goes on before this wonderful hour. And last of all, thank you to Larry Speltz. It was actually Larry's idea to do this today. He collared me the very first time we met and said he thought that in the centenary year of Gian Carlo Menotti's birth, we really ought to be adding to what the festival is doing to commemorate him and having a small sort of memorial hour. And so I want to thank Larry for the idea, and also now for giving us a personal insight into Gian Carlo Menotti before John Pascoe speaks.
Hopefully this is close enough. Is that picking me up? No? I'll try and hold this and simultaneously turn the pages. Thank you for attending, and I'd like to thank the Library Society and Wide Angle's organizer, Caroline Van Tuzias, for inviting me to briefly acquaint you, or reacquaint you, as the case may be, with Gian Carlo Menotti, and to present today's featured speaker, John Pascoe. I had presented a slide presentation of photos, but through a miscommunication, probably my own making, the equipment's not here. So we'll do this sans photos. I hearken back to an image, which is a beautiful photograph of Menotti on the cover of Life magazine in 1947. And it's an appropriate image and memory. It was at the time that the medium ran on Broadway. It was arguably a high point in Gian Carlo Menotti's popularity, beginning with his commission to compose an opera for the Metropolitan Opera, The Island God, which debuted in 1942, followed 5 years later by the Broadway production of The Medium, and continuing through to a commission from NBC to write the world's first opera for that new medium, A Mall and Night Visitors, concluding with 2 Pulitzer Prizes for The Consul in 1950 and The Saint of Bleecker Street in 1955. Gian Carlo enjoyed a special and rare combination of artistic, popular, and financial success that eludes most artists, and indeed would not be experienced again by him for the remaining 50 years of his life. This was a special period from 1942 to 1955. It is therefore quite appropriate to honor the centenary of his birth with a work that is emblematic of Gian Carlo Menotti's most successful period of artistic work, and indeed emblematic of the man himself and the artist. There are many who knew Gian Carlo Menotti longer than I. They could speak about the maestro just as well or even better than I. Sadly, many of these other friends and associates, whom I too counted as friends, have passed away in recent years. Lito Gialloretti, John Arduin, who wrote the survey of Menotti's work, The Stages of Menotti, Ralph Ravaiolo, who was the director of the festival in Italy for many years, and most recently, Roman Terlecki, who I believe was also a mutual friend of John and I. Roman and I had the pleasure of working together for many years on many productions with Gian Carlo. Since our time today is brief, I want to focus the next few minutes on Gian Carlo. I'll resist the temptation to dwell upon my own working relationship and friendship with him, except to provide a little background that may provide you a context within which to understand my personal perspective. I first met Gian Carlo in 1983 when I was a supernumerary in Sam Barber's Antony and Cleopatra that was staged by Gian Carlo during Spoleto Festival here in Charleston. The following year, I was one of two personal assistants, really overglorified errand boys we were, and I had a small part in his opera that he staged in '84, Juan alla Loca. Excuse me. I worked with him on many of his operas while I was earning a performing arts degree at the College of Charleston. Ironically, I never worked on a production of The Medium. However, I did have an opportunity to work with Gian Carlo in many of the great opera houses and theaters of the world, Teatro Petrozelli in Bari, the Teatro Montaigne in Paris, the great houses of Spoleto, Italy, Houston, Philadelphia, Washington, New York, Brooklyn Academy of Music, and so forth. I think I have been associated with about 12 different productions of them all, and The Night Visitors still claim to be the most performed opera in the world, much to the dismay of my friends and family. I can sing every role in them all, and usually do at Christmas time, duets notwithstanding. I last saw Gian Carlo in the Piazza del Duomo in Spoleto during the festival there in 2004. Who was Gian Carlo Menotti? I have asked many different people here in Charleston that question in the time since I was invited to speak today. I was surprised how many in the city today have either no idea or have only a vague idea of who he was. Aside from his artistic contributions, his impact upon the direction that historic Charleston's 20th century rebirth took is significant, thanks in large part to his selection of Charleston in the 70s as home of Spoleto Festival USA. If timing is indeed everything, it was no small coincidence that that occurred at the time that a visionary mayor began his very long term as mayor of Charleston, and Ted Stern was remaking the College of Charleston. These three together, I think, really directed the rebirth of Charleston as we know it today. Not so long ago, Gian Carlo filled the city with some of the world's greatest artists, the likes of Tennessee Williams, Jerome Robbins, Saul LeWitt, Beverly Sills, Maestro Mark Stringer, just to name a few. He was born in 1911. He died in 2007. He virtually spanned a century. Think of Menotti as a bridge between two centuries. Here was a man born to a mother who herself was born in the 19th century. Imagine this man, who many of us here in Charleston today knew well, was for 13 years a contemporary of Puccini. His composition teacher, Scalera, studied under Wagner's concertmaster. It may be tempting to associate Gian Carlo's artistic heritage with Puccini and the other great Italian musical artists that overlapped the 19th and 20th centuries, but Gian Carlo's passion was Schubert. Gian Carlo told me that he adored Schubert's simplicity and how he could render as much music from a single dissonance as many others would from a larger, grander symphonic work. He was an artist thoroughly a product of the 1800s, but who was also thoroughly modern. He appreciated Schoenberg, was friends with Copland, Schumann, and modern playwrights such as Ionesco and Jean Cocteau. He was often referred to by critics as a neo-romantic, but he loved the modern world, and his music has a clear 20th century edge to it. He loved and indeed had an impressive collection of contemporary art. Yet, he was fascinated with old world superstitions and the conflicts of economic classes. I recall Gian Carlo always had in his wallet a picture of Padre Pio, a recently beatified 20th century priest whom Gian Carlo once made a pilgrimage to meet. He avoided the number 13, played the lottery, and anytime he found a penny heads up, he put it in his shoe. Perhaps just as significant to his playing the lottery and picking up a penny were his persistent financial problems. Gian Carlo's father passed away when Gian Carlo was still a boy living with his mother. He had been a coffee importer and had business dealings in South America. Menottis were affluent but not extremely wealthy. Gian Carlo's father's business associates were much wealthier, more powerful, and when Mrs. Menotti attempted to claim her husband's share of the coffee business, they swindled her of it. Gian Carlo often spoke derisively of the wealthy, although he of course longed to be so. He told me once that Sam Barber and he used to joke that they and other artists were merely the after-dinner mints of the rich. To conclude, I believe that one can detect in the medium some of Gian Carlo's attitudes about artists and the wealthy, and certainly his curiosity of the supernatural. Here is, after all, a woman who takes money from people who are wealthier than her to perform, albeit a seance. There is also the question of faith. His pilgrimage to Padre Pio was in search of faith, which he lacked. He told me that faith was a gift from God and that it is a gift that God did not grant him. He was troubled by this and sought confirmation of God's existence. Just as the character of Baba in the medium is a woman caught between two worlds, a world of reality, which she cannot wholly comprehend, and a supernatural world which she cannot believe, Gian Carlo Menotti is a medium who also struggled with his faith and his reliance upon the money of his patrons, but rather than seances with the deceased, he is our medium, connecting our 21st century with the 19th and 20th centuries. Thank you very much.
We're really delighted to have John Pascoe here. I think I'm right in saying that he's British born, but really lives in Italy. So I think only Charleston could tempt him away from the beautiful place he normally lives. Actually, that's not quite true, because I read something recently that said he moves at warp speed at all times, and I think this year alone he's been Dallas Opera, here at Spoleto USA, of course, and he's going to be doing San Francisco Opera's Lucrezia Borgia with Renée Fleming. So just a snapshot of an incredibly busy life. John, along with several of our wide-angle speakers, is a real Renaissance man. He doesn't just direct the operas that he's involved with, he also designs the sets. I mean, not always, it depends on the role, but for example, in relation to the medium, he'll be designing the sets. He often designs the costumes, the lighting as well. I don't think there are many people who combine all of those talents. And so he is a very special example of his art. He also has a hidden talent as a portrait painter, and has recently put out some very acclaimed portraits of people whose names would be very familiar to all of you. I mentioned that he's been talked about as moving at warp speed at all times. I think one other quote that I have to mention is the great tenor himself, Placido Domingo, saying that working with John was unforgettable, and he placed John among the top directors he had ever had the privilege of working with. So it's really very special that John has found the time amidst the busy rehearsals for Spoleto this year. And as a child of post-war Europe, I'm particularly fascinated to hear his insights into Menotti's opera, The Medium, which he'll be putting on in a few weeks. Thank you, John.